Hi guys, hope you're all well. This is Ulas. Today we'll be studying the anatomy of the diaphragm. Okay guys, let's start. Guys, we'll be making this series into two videos. In the first video, we are discussing about the basic anatomy and the major openings of the diaphragm. In the next video, we'll discuss in detail the functions of the diaphragm and their clinical importance. Okay, let's start. Guys, what is diaphragm basically? Here we are discussing about the thoraco-abdominal diaphragm. So, thoraco-abdominal diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscle which separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity, isn't it? So, in fact, in Greek, the word diaphragm is derived from two Greek words, dia and phrama. So, dia means apart and phrama means a fence. So, diaphragm is basically a fence which keeps the thoracic cavity apart from the abdominal cavity. Okay. It's a muscle, right? So in anatomy, any muscle we discuss under the headings of origin, insertion, nerve supply and action for the ease of understanding. We'll be discussing this too in that way. See, what's the origin of a muscle? Origin of a muscle is an attachment where the muscle is least movable. It's basically when you take origin and insertion moves towards the origin. The same thing happens here too. We'll discuss that. See, the origin of diaphragm is circumferential. What do we mean by a circumferential origin? Means if there is a circle here, the diaphragm takes origin from the whole of the circumference. And what is the circumference? It is basically the thoracic outlet. Thoracic outlet. What is thoracic outlet? We'll be discussing that. See, guys, for ease, like we told, it is a circumferential origin, right? So if it is a circumferential origin, for the ease of remembering, our anatomy is actually divided into sternal part, costal part and the vertebral part. See, I'll show you a diagram here. See, guys, this is basically a thoraco-abdominal diaphragm. See, it looks like a dome, right? And it even has two heads like this, so it's also called as a parachute shaped muscle. So we'll be discussing that. What are those things actually? See here, this is the upward view. So if like this is how the diaphragm is. If we look from below, the diaphragm will appear like this. Okay, so this is the sternum here. To be specific, it's the xiphisternum, and these are the ribs here, and these are the lumbar vertebrae. So this is the sternal part, this is the costal part, and this is the lumbar part. So what specifically takes origin? See here, the origin of diaphragm from the sternal part is from the xiphoid process. It takes origin as two fleshy slips like this. Sorry. From the xiphoid process, the diaphragm takes origin like this, in the form of two fleshy slips on totally two fleshy slips like this. And from the costal part, the diaphragm takes origin from the lower 6 ribs and their corresponding costal cartilages. See, we know that, right? The ribs attached to the sternum with the help of costal cartilage. It takes origin from those cartilages and the corresponding ribs. So, which are the lower 6 ribs? That is basically 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. So, from these ribs and their corresponding costal cartilages, the diaphragm takes origin. Got it right? The sternal part as two fleshy slips, and from all those ribs and their corresponding costal cartilages. And now the lumbar part. What is the lumbar part? The lumbar part, it's really interesting because lumbar part not exactly from the lumbar vertebrae. It takes origin from medial and lateral arcuate ligaments and the two crusts. What do we mean by crust? It's not the crust you have in college. It means leg. Okay, a crust basically means leg, but it also means any anatomical extension, either an organ or a muscle which has an elongated extension. We call it crust in anatomy. So see here, guys, we'll be discussing the medial and lateral arcuate ligaments here. Okay, arc, you know that, right? Arc is basically something like this shape. So the medial arcuate ligament and the lateral arcuate ligament. Medial arcuate ligament is I'll just show you a diagram, it would be easier. See, you can see here, right? Oh, sorry. This is the, I'll just erase these things for a second. Yeah. See, this is the psoas major muscle. Psoas major. And this is the medial arcuate ligament. Why medial? Because it's towards the midline. Why arcuate? It is in the form of arc and it's a ligament. It's basically condensation of the fascia which forms a ligament. Okay, so it is taking origin from here too. Diaphragm is taking origin from here. And what are the attachments of this medial arcuate ligament? See here, medial arcuate ligament is medially the L1 vertebra's body, laterally the transverse process of the same L1 vertebra. See here, this is basically the body of L1 and this is the transverse process of L1. It's behind, you can't see it. You can see here now, it's the corresponding side on the other side as well. So that was the medial arcuate ligament. Now the lateral arcuate ligament, see here, this is the, sorry, this was the medial arcuate ligament, isn't it? From L1 body to the transverse process. Now this lateral arcuate ligament begins from the transverse process and goes till the 12th rib. 12th rib. See, this basically the ribs are like this now. So the lateral arcuate ligament is going from the transverse process of L1 to the 12th rib. 12th rib is a floating rib. It doesn't come all the way to the front. It stays there. So body to transverse process, the medial arcuate, transverse process to the 12th rib, lateral arcuate ligament. So what muscle does this cover? It covers the quadratus lumborum muscle. Those are all the muscles in the deeper section of the abdomen. We'll be studying that soon. Okay. So this is from transverse process to the 12th rib. Those were the arcuate ligaments. See, diaphragm takes origin from here. Same thing on the other side. Diaphragm takes origin from here. So that was the medial and lateral arcuate ligaments. Now what do we now let's talk about our crus. Okay, crus of a diaphragm, it has two crusses, two crus crusses, that is the right crus and the left crus. The right is longer than the left. Why? See here, it is taking origin from the anterolateral surface of the L1, L2, L3 vertebra. Left is taking origin from L1, L2 vertebra. So right is usually longer. I'll just show you the crus. What does the crus mean actually? See here. No. Yeah, here. I'll erase all this. So crus means a leg, right? See, this is the right crus of the diaphragm from L1, L2, L3. This is the left crus from L1, L2. So those two are taking origin from the lumbar, basically the anterolateral surfaces of the lumbar vertebrae, and they are going, I'll just show you. So diaphragm takes origin from here too. And you know, guys, the diaphragm, the right crus is really interesting because the medial fibers of the right crus, see here, I'll draw it in a different color. This is basically the general fibers of the right crus, and this is the medial fiber. Imagine this is the medial fibers of the right crus. It's going like this, like this, like this, and forming an arch, and it's covering the esophagus. See, this is the esophagus here. It's covering the esophagus. It's covering the esophageal hiatus basically. So what do you think can happen? When a muscle contracts, its fibers get shortened, right? So it will, if this is the esophagus inside, see, imagine this is the esophagus. If it contracts, it closes the esophagus, esophageal opening. So whenever you are breathing, it constricts the sphincter and the stomach content wouldn't regurgitate. Isn't that interesting? It has many other important features. We'll be studying that in the next video. So that was the right crus. Same thing happens in the left crus, and it forms like it's basically digitates with the other fibers. Okay. Now let's talk about the incision of the muscle. Where does the muscle get inserted into? It's taking origin from a circumference, a large circumference, and getting inserted into a central tendon. That's why diaphragm is special. Usually the muscles are in the shape like this. There will be a muscle belly, tendon, tendon. But here there is muscle here, centrally there is a tendon. See? Guys, this is the central tendon. You can see here now. This is the central tendon. The anatomists describe the central tendon as the shape of the central part is a triangle, and it has a tongue-shaped right and left slips. We'll be discussing that in detail when we discuss the uses of it. Basically, the central tendon is where the diaphragm gets attached, and it has an esophageal opening. See, it has an insufficiency for inferior vena cava. So the inferior vena cava is a major blood vessel which carries the blood towards the heart from the lower body, and heart is in the thorax. The lower body includes abdomen, so it has to come from abdomen to the thorax, right? But diaphragm won't allow, so it has an opening for it. So that opening is in the central tendon. It also has an interesting clinical feature. We'll be discussing that soon. Even in cardiology and all, when we auscultate for murmurs and all, it has an important feature. We'll be discussing that. And this is the aortic hiatus. We'll be discussing that soon too. That was the insertion. Now what's the nerve supply? Diaphragm is a muscle, and it's a voluntary muscle, so it has a nerve supply, right? See, we are breathing. It's under the control of a central nervous system, and it's under conscious control too. So the motor innervation is given by the phrenic nerve. Phrenic basically means diaphragm. Okay, so what is the root value of phrenic nerve? C4, C3, C4, C5 is the root value of diaphragm. C4 is the main part. So how is this important, or how can we remember it? It has many interesting clinical features. We'll be discussing that soon. And the thing is, in our MBBS, first year MBBS days, we used to remember this like C3, C4, C5 keeps the diaphragm alive. C3, C4, C5 keeps the diaphragm alive. That's the root value of the phrenic nerve basically. And then the sensory distribution is from the thoracic nerves, the lower 6 thoracic nerves basically. See, it's taking origin from the lower 6 ribs, so lower 6 thoracic nerve correspondingly supplies it. Now what's the action? See guys, here's one. Origin is here, insertion is here, and it's in the dome shape. So if they contract, the dome will come down. Dome will come down. It's just like imagine this is the circumference, and this is a dome shaped muscle. It's in the relaxed state. So if it contracts, it becomes like this. It becomes like this. Relax, contract, relax, contract. So how is that important? We'll be discussing that too. Okay, see here guys, there's an interesting point here. See here, the diaphragm is basically taking origin from the borders in the circumferential way, right, like this. But the diaphragm should have been a flat, like if imagine this is the chest, anterior, posterior, the diaphragm is like this in the dome shape. What do you think is keeping it in that shape? Because if it was just the origin and insertion, it should have been somewhat like a flat muscle, a sheet like this, but it's in the form of dome shape. What do you think is keeping the shape? There's an interesting feature here. See, there's a beautiful organ here. What do you think it is? Here, that's the heart, isn't it? Heart is in the thorax, and there is something covering it, a beautiful white shiny layer. That's the fibrous pericardium, isn't it? The fibrous pericardium is attached to the central tendon of diaphragm too. So it keeps the basically embryologically what happened when the septum transversum was like when the heart and septum transversum were getting developed, they were up, and the phrenic nerve supplied them, and during the development they came down like this, heart and the diaphragm both, and the phrenic nerve still came with them, a loyal friend, and the heart and the diaphragm are also good friends. So the fibrous pericardium held the diaphragm. so it held it like this, so it is contributing to its dome shape. Okay, now let's study an interesting topic, that is the openings in the diaphragm. Guys, see, diaphragm is basically a fence, right? It separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. But if that was the case, whatever you eat, the stomach is in the abdomen, esophagus is in the thorax. So if it was very strict, you wouldn't have been able to eat. We should have got some other adaptation basically. But we have it, like what can we say? The special permission for some structures. Those are through the openings, the major openings and the minor openings. See here, guys, the major openings. Opening for inferior vena cava, esophagus and the aorta. They are basically like VIPs, very important persons. So just think of it like this, guys. India, England and Australia. India, England and Australia team captains, they are all VIPs, right? So they can go anywhere, they can go into stadium, they can come out of stadium easily. Public usually cannot go during the match, isn't it? So, okay, that was just an think of remaining. India for inferior vena cava, England for esophagus, Australia for aorta. You can remember like that. Okay, so I'll just show you an image. See here, guys, this we saw the insufficiency for inferior vena cava, and this right crust is going and forming a ring around the esophagus, and aorta, it's going basically under the median arcuate ligament. We studied the medial arcuate ligaments. Now, above them there is a median arcuate ligament. So it goes behind the diaphragm. I'll just show you. Yeah, see here. Yeah, this diagram. See, the diaphragm is going like this. It's not actually cutting off the aorta. Aorta is actually behind the diaphragm till the T12 vertebra. At the level of T8 there is inferior vena cava. At the level of T10 there is esophagus, and at the level of T12 there is aorta. You can remember it like this. Imagine there is a World Cup and India won, so it's in the first place. England is second place. Australia is third place. So at the upper level there is India, T8. Second, T10, that is England. And T12 is the last, that is Australia, third place basically. So those were the thoracic, like the vertebral levels of it. So when the diaphragm contracts, it can have effect on inferior vena cava and esophagus mainly, but it doesn't usually have an effect on the aorta. Okay, we'll be studying these again in detail too. So we studied there's an insufficiency or a special permission for these three structures, but usually if England team goes into any cricket team goes into a stadium, only the team players don't go, their manager also go, their assistant, personal assistant also go. It's the same way. Inferior vena cava has a personal assistant, that is the right phrenic nerve branches. Some branches of right phrenic nerve go along with the inferior vena cava. Now esophagus, what goes with the esophagus? Guys, see here, there's something interesting which is happening. See, where is the esophagus finally going into? It's going into stomach. Stomach is in abdomen, and esophagus is in thorax, and some part is in abdomen, isn't it? There's a beautiful cranial nerve, the long course cranial nerve, which actually has an effect on the gastric motility, gastric secretion, on the digestive system, which is that is the vagus nerve. It has a right vagus and a left vagus. Both have to supply the stomach. So why do they need an additional opening when they can go along with the esophagus? Esophagus also going to stomach, vagus also going to stomach, so they both go with the esophagus through the esophageal hiatus. Then there is a left gastric vessel which just goes and comes back. Why is it doing like that? See guys, left gastric vessel is also in the abdomen mostly. So it goes and it has some supply to the lower part of esophagus. Lower part of esophagus is in the thorax now, so it also goes through the esophageal hiatus and supplies the esophagus. Then there is lymphatics from the lower one of esophagus, which also goes to the goes through the esophageal hiatus. Then we have aorta, aortic opening, which is saw. Now aorta has two friends, that is the thoracic duct which comes in, and the azygous vein which also comes in, which is one of the VIP vein of the body. Okay, see here, along with esophagus, right vagus nerve branches. Here, right phrenic nerve branches. This is the right vagus and left vagus. And here we have the aorta. Along with it, there is thoracic duct and the what else? There is the azygous vein, which is the VIP vein of the body. Now, see guys, in the stadium, usually the VIP question nowadays it's difficult. Before, what they used to do was from the general coach, they used to jump into the VIP compartment long before. So something like even the public have a feel like they want to be in a VIP post, na? Like that. Some structures actually enter in a very secret way into the thorax and diaphragm, making their own openings and going. You know, they used to cut the fence and go, na? Similarly like this. They are cutting the diaphragm and going. Where in the diaphragm they are cutting, we'll be studying that. Okay. So minor openings of the diaphragm. That is the crus of the diaphragm. Crus of the diaphragm, right crus and the left crus we have. There is something known as greater splanchnic nerve and lesser splanchnic nerve. Each on the corresponding side pierce their crusts and basically enter the abdomen from the lumbar plexus and supply the thorax too in some part. So those were okay. Now on the left side, there's a beautiful vein, which is the hemiazygous vein. Hemiazygous vein. So hemiazygous vein is in the left side. It is also appears in the left because it's not a VIP. The counterpart, that azygous vein, was a VIP. It went with the aorta, isn't it? VIP treatment. But the same thing on the left side, hemiazygous vein didn't get a VIP treatment. So it's sad and it went through the crus. Then there is the medial arcuate ligament. We just studied it was over the psoas major muscle. Sympathetic chains from both the sides go through the medial arcuate ligament. From the under the lateral arcuate ligament, what goes? There is subcostal nerve and vessels, subcostal nerve, artery, vein. Then see, we'll just draw this. See, this was the sympathetic chain. Okay, going under the it's going a sympathetic chain going under the medial arcuate ligament on both sides. Then there is subcostal nerve, subcostal artery, subcostal vein going through here, going through the under the lateral arcuate ligament. Then there is a space of Larry. This is an interesting space. They even call it as foramen of Morgagni. We'll be studying that soon. It is basically under the origins of xiphoid process. They are taking origin like two slips, and there is a seventh costal cartilage. So see here, this is the one area, this one area, but there is a gap here, na? So that gap is what it is contributing to the formation of Larry space. So that also has an interesting clinical significance. Structures can herniate through that. We'll be studying that in detail. What goes through that normally? Basically the superior epigastric artery, vein, and some lymphatics also goes through it. Then there is a musculophrenic vessels. So musculophrenic vessels, in a similar way, they pierce the diaphragm. Like if this is the diaphragm, they pierce at the diaphragm at the level of 9th costal cartilage. See, between the 7th costal cartilage was the foramen of Morgagni. Between the 9th, at the level of 9th costal cartilage, there is piercing. That is the musculophrenic vessels, musculophrenic artery and vein. So guys, why are we studying the openings in diaphragm? What's so important about it? See, just like whenever there's a cricket stadium and there are a lot of people, a lot of ways where people can go in and come out, the security is compromised there, isn't it? There's security breach there. Any terrorists or any other people can come there and do their nonsense there. So something similar happens with the human body as well. Whenever there are foramen, there is a possibility that the structures may herniate into it and cause nonsense or cause a problem. We'll be studying that in the next video very soon. And if you have any doubts, please post it in the comment section, guys. I'd be happy to answer you. Have a great day. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye.